A lot of us have spent years and years and even decades in training, and we always think that it's a positive thing, which it is most of the time. However, there are some side effects from it, and a lot of people don't realize this. So today we're going to be reviewing the side effects of the medical training that you went through and the effects that they had on your mind and on your perspective of life that may be holding you back, and they're just side effects from the way that you were trained. So let's jump into this. As always, medical entrepreneur, one vision, one purpose, freedom through prosperity. So the side effects of your medical training. The number one side effect that I see from medical training is a consistent focus on negative events, especially for people that are in the surgical and anesthesia fields. And I would even say, oncology to some degree as well. But basically, most doctors and advanced practice nurses, CRNAs, registered nurses, we all have a focus on what could go wrong. And a lot of that was taught to us so that we would have the ability to project things that could potentially go wrong in a situation so we could be prepared for them. However, that doesn't serve us in our outside life. So, for example, in anesthesia, it's very common to be, we were always taught anesthesia, like when you're in the operating room, take a look around, like what could go wrong? What happens if the circuit gets disconnected? What happens if the power goes out? What happens if your vaporizer doesn't work? What happens if the airway gets removed by accident? Like, what is your backup plan for these potential issues, right? And in the operating room, that serves you. It helps protect you from negative outcomes and make sure you're prepared, etc. However, for real life, it actually hurts you because the reality is that when you're focused so negatively, you can't see positive things that are coming to you. And that's why you see many physicians, many nurse practitioners, many CRNAs, many registered nurses that are very much focused on negative. And so what happens in their personal life is that they consistently create negative things because they're so focused on what could go wrong. They're always thinking about that. And so because of that, they can't see many of the positive things. They can't see many of the opportunities. And a lot of people may say, hey, I don't really believe in that. But the reality is there's science behind this. You might be familiar with the reticular activating system. The reticular activating system exists basically in the top part of your brainstem near the medulla oblongata. The reticular activating system is basically the system that filters out many of the neural transmissions before they reach your consciousness. Just to give you an example of how this works, have you ever bought a car and then found out later after you bought it that the car was everywhere? So, for example, a friend of mine recently bought a Tesla, very popular. And so he, before he was so focused on getting this Tesla, he wanted a Tesla. He had to wait a long time to get it. He got it. And it's a beautiful car. Don't get me wrong. But as soon as he got it, everywhere he went, he just saw Teslas everywhere. It seemed like everybody and their brother had a Tesla. And the reason is that not that everybody and their brother just got a Tesla. Those Teslas were already there, but he didn't notice them because his reticular activating system wasn't aware of it. His reticular activating system was actually filtering that out because his thoughts were on other things, his mind was on other things, and that was not an important detail. You can even test this yourself, for example. If you start to think, what does my back of my left shoulder feel like right now? Initially, you'll notice that you had no awareness of your back of your left shoulder. But as you think about it, what will happen is that you'll start to notice like, oh, I can feel it. I can feel my shirt on my shoulder. I can feel how it feels. I can feel the tension in the muscles of the trapezius. I can feel, et cetera. So, basically you can notice those things when you focus on them, but when you don't, the reticular activating system takes over and actually filters those things out. And so a lot of people don't realize that by focusing on disease states constantly, by focusing on negative outcomes constantly, by focusing on potential negative outcomes, they basically train their brain to focus on negative. And so many times they miss opportunities, they miss, great fun experiences because they're always focused on negative or what could go wrong. And I'd say this is probably the number one side effect of medical training. The other issue is a critical focus. A lot of times in medicine, we're always taught to be critical. Don't trust, just because there's one, just because, you see one thing, it may not be accurate. Just because you hear one thing, somebody tells you something doesn't mean it's real. You better back it up with data and science and all this kind of stuff. This kind of critical focus has the same effect where it basically makes you very, very skeptical. And this is why you see many, many medical professionals have a very skeptical bent to their life. That if someone came up and said, hey, I have this, amazing opportunity, this is here, this is there, the first thing they say is there's no way that can be real. And even if it is real, even if they could do research and figure out if it's real, they naturally just dismiss it because they have a very critical focus, and it's been trained into them over years and years of repetitive activities, right? The third thing I see as a side effect of the medical training is an over-reliance on published data and studies. This is a big one, and I'm sure it's going to be controversial. I'm sure people are going to be, against this, or some people will be. But I think you need to realize, like, if you've been in academic medicine, then you understand exactly what's going on with studies. I was in, a very large academic training center during my training, and I remember this very clearly. It was, if you were an associate professor, if you were anybody who was an attending, you basically had a mandate to publish or perish, as they said. You basically had to publish a research study I think it was every month or every quarter. You had to publish something. And if you didn't, you weren't in good standing with the dean of the, whatever it is, like if you're dean of anesthesia, the dean of surgery, dean of orthopedics, whatever it is, right? And so they had this constant push for publishing papers. What they didn't have a push for was the quality of the papers published. And so this is where you see a lot of research that comes out. The reality is that majority of the research that come out is basically people trying to maintain their career. And the quality of the studies are getting less and less. And this is why you're seeing studies about, in anesthesia, for example, we'll see studies that are basically, polls of, students' experiences in the operating room, and they'll do a whole study on that. Well, while that might be useful in some aspects, that's not nearly the same kind of, clinical data and outcome analysis that really expands your medical mind and expands your ability to treat patients. A lot of this over-reliance on studies is really falsely placed because there's a lot of people that are making their career through studies, and they don't have to be necessarily medical professionals. There's a lot of PhDs out there who their entire livelihood depends 100% on who funds their research. And many of these guys, if you really dig into this, they don't make a lot of money. And basically, if a company comes in and says, hey, I will pay you $100K to do this research, they are happy to sign up and do whatever it takes to make that company happy. And this is why, statistically, when you look at research studies, you will find that 75% of research studies cannot be reproduced. Now, just think about that for a second. 75% of research studies out there, 75% of the things that you're basing your clinical decisions on cannot be reproduced. As kind of a more, scary thing, one thing I saw, like when I was in training, is I saw 5 separate times in my career, 5 times, where basically there was a famous researcher who was essentially found to be falsifying data and had all of their research redacted. And so I remember one of the times that this happened, this was a guy who was thought to be like an expert in his field, and he was later discovered to be a fraud, and he was basically making up data and publishing studies because he had he had a lot of pressure on him to make studies and get them published. And, we had companies that wanted to pay him to make these studies. And they were very clear that, the study needed to show this and that. And if it didn't, they were going to find somebody else, Realize that a lot of the reliance on studies and published data, while there is some value to it, you have to also be really careful that you're not being overly reliant on it. Just because there's a study out there doesn't mean it makes any sense. I mean, just take a look at the history of medicine. If you start to go back in medicine, you'll see that there's almost like a cyclical effect where, we think, hey, this is the right solution to this illness. And then later we think, oh, no, it's this other way. And then a couple, 10 years later, it's like, oh, hey, it is this other way, And so like a lot of times, it's like a back and forth. I mean, you can see this, for example, in nutrition. I mean, how many different things have you heard about nutrition? First, it was, hey, don't eat anything with cholesterol, it's bad. Then it was, don't eat anything with carbs, they're bad. Then it was, hey, don't eat, you got to eat like a paleo, like you got to eat like as if you were in primordial times and you didn't have, grains and these kind of things. And then you have people that are doing keto, you have people that are vegan, all this research stuff just completely conflicts, Another great example of this is, there was a lot of studies published about chondroitin sulfate and glucosamine for osteoarthritis of the knee, right? And so if you look at that, there's literally, last time I researched it, I think there was over 25 studies that had disagreed with each other. And about half the studies showed that it was useful, half the studies showed it was not useful. And it makes you wonder with so many studies, like, is there any accuracy at all out there? Does it actually work? Does it not? And so, one of the things that we can get pulled into from as a side effect of medical training is the loss of like what's right in front of us. So often when a patient comes in, I see so many times where people say, oh, hey, this study did this, so you need to do that. Well, the reality is that study may not be accurate. And if you look throughout the history of medicine, you'll see that many, many studies that are published are later either redacted or a new study comes along and says something completely opposite than what that study said. It's just a complete, difference of opinion. And you start to realize how every study that's published, it's really just having one study that says something really doesn't mean much. You're going to have a long-standing history of studies that actually prove this over and over for it to be useful. And then they forget that, hey, you have somebody in front of you right now that you could try a treatment on and see if it works. And what works for that person may not work for somebody else. And we know this because this is very common in medicine to have one treatment work for somebody and the same treatment not work for someone else. This whole over-reliance on studies and acting that, this belief that like scientific studies are essentially your God, which you worship. And, basically if the study says this, then that must be what I do, I think is a huge, huge mistake. And most people don't realize that 75% of studies cannot be reproduced. And so I think it's really important to realize that, hey, all those studies that are out there, you really have to look at the intent of the people who are publishing them. You really have to look at the funding of them. And you have to realize like where these are coming from. If you've been in an academic hospital, if you've been in an academic environment, then most of the professors that are there are under huge pressure to pump out study after study after study. And the reason why is because for them, that defines their career. And also as a department, the more studies a department publishes, the higher standing the department has. And that's why you see many departments just pushing and pushing and pushing people to pump out studies, whether good or not, just to get more literature and more studies out there. And I think it's a big mistake, and I think it's actually hurt medicine a lot. The other side effect of medical training is basically perfectionism. In medicine, because we're dealing with life and death, you have to be perfect as much as you can. You have to be accurate, and you have to do everything in a certain way that's, standard of care or whatever, right? This attitude of perfectionism is just baked into all the training in medicine. In the real world, though, it's not like that at all. Like if you look at most natural systems, you don't have to be perfect to get a result in most natural systems. So, for example, in business, as a medical entrepreneur, you may not be perfect at what you do. You may build a clinic and maybe you don't get your phones answered perfectly. Maybe you don't get, your website looking perfect. Maybe you have many things that are imperfect. But if you get enough of them together, you can still create the result that you desire. And so we see this over and over, particularly in business and natural systems, where even a small percentage of having things that are accurate can make a huge difference down the line. And so it's really important that you realize that you are probably a perfectionist by your training, if you weren't already before, and that perfectionism is really something that is dangerous to you, especially in the real world, in the non-medical worlds. In medicine, with all the legal liabilities and these things, I think there is some wisdom to trying to make things as perfect as possible. However, once you leave the world of medicine, you go out to the real world, the fact is that you can't be perfect at everything you do. And in fact, if you try to be perfect at everything you do, you will likely fail, because the reality is that many times getting 70% of something right is all you need to get the thing done. Getting 60% of something right is all you need to make the thing happen. And in medicine and throughout our academics, we're always taught, no, you need to get the 95, you need to get the 90%, you got to get the A, you got to get the A plus, right? You're taught over and over this perfectionism ideal. And in the reality is that it actually decreases your ability to learn, and it decreases your tolerance for making mistakes. And that's why you see a lot of people that are medical professionals that are very hesitant to try things that are new. They're very afraid to, because they believe in their mind that the only way that they are good is by being a perfectionist at what they do, right? And so if they have a new task that they've never done before, they don't want to touch it. They don't want to even try it. They don't want to think about it, because their fear is that they will not do a good job. And it's true, they probably won't. Like when you're trying something new, you will probably be really bad. But the reality is, to get good at anything, whether it's medicine or surgery or whatever, you have to constantly practice over and over, right? In order to get there. So when you first start something new, you will likely be very, very bad at it, because you're not used to doing it. You don't have the experience. It's your first time. You're trying to figure things out. And, because of this perfectionism bias that's baked in from your training, many people will just give up and throw in the towel there and say, hey, I can't do it. I'm too busy, whatever. And they don't realize that, hey, this is actually how you get good at things. And the reality is that most of the time in real life, in the real world, you don't have to have 100% to get something to be completed, to get an outcome you want. Many times I'll see things that like you can get 40%, 60%, 70%, and it will still be enough to get the outcome that you desire. The fifth thing I see from as a side effect of medical training is this attitude of like sacrifice. Especially, you know, as a physician, I felt like this was really, really baked into our training. And it was just this attitude that you need to sacrifice yourself to help others. And while I think some sacrifice is nice, I really don't think it's good for either party. The reality is that if you're sacrificing yourself to help someone else, you just end up hurting yourself, and then you can't help as many people. And so this kind of sacrifice, kind of sacrificial attitude, or that you need to be a martyr kind of attitude, is really, really bad for you. And that's what you see over and over. Like, I can only tell you how many, like I remember one thing that happened was, I think it was the Duke School of General Surgery. They were, the dean of the Duke School of General Surgery was extremely proud because his people had a 97% divorce rate of his residents. It's like a huge divorce. Like almost everybody got divorced when they went to training. And he was very proud of that because he thought it meant that they were more focused on their job and became better surgeons. The reality is that, you know, you can see this with, doctors, nurse practitioners, when they have an issue with their relationship, their performance is definitely affected. It's very rare to find someone who's not affected by relationship issues, you know? And yet, you know, here we are, we have this attitude and we're even encouraging it at a huge academic institution that it's well respected, basically to essentially sacrifice your life, sacrifice your happiness so that you can serve patients that are basically Medicare and Medicaid patients, you know? Does it really make sense? Does it really make sense for the system if you're sacrificing the people that have gone through all these years of training, all this stuff, you destroy their lives so they can continually serve this population? Does that really make sense? Because it destroys the system that's in there. You know, you wouldn't, if I told you, hey, I can put a fuel in your vehicle and your vehicle will run slightly faster, maybe 20% faster, but in the end, it will destroy your engine and you'll have to get a new engine. Would you do it? Most people would say, hell no, because they realize the damage far outweighs any benefit that you would get. And that's this kind of attitude that's baked into medicine, is that you need to suffer. You need to work harder. You need to like push more. You need to, you know, if you're not, you know, working all hours of the day, if you're not, you know, sacrificing, if you're not missing time with your kids, if you're not missing time with your family, then you're not being a good practitioner of whatever. That attitude it's just a whole bunch of BS. And the reality is that it's very dangerous and it's very damaging to people. And that's why you see things like physician suicide rates are through the roof. And the only reason why I say physician is because many of the other groups are not measured. You know, CRNA, which are nurse anesthetists, their suicide rates are also very high. Their drug addiction rates are also very high. Nurse practitioners' rates are very high. I think physicians, you know, especially anesthesiologists, are number one. But basically, almost every medical practitioner in medicine has very high rates of depression, suicide, drug abuse, and basically just, you know, not being very happy with where they are. And a lot of this stems from this attitude that you need to sacrifice. And it's kind of reinforced over and over in our education that you need to sacrifice. But the reality is that what ends up happening is that you sacrifice so much you can't give anything else. And it's kind of like the old, like, I don't know if you've ever seen this thing where, you know, when you first taught to be a lifeguard, so when I was a Boy Scout, like we'd get this badge, like to be a lifeguard, right? So I had to learn how to be a lifeguard to earn this merit badge, you know? And so one of the things I remember that was so shocking to me at the time was the guy came in, the trainer, and he basically said, like, look, there's going to be times where you have somebody drowning and there's nothing you can do and you have to let them drown. And I remember thinking like, whoa, that's like so opposite of the reason why I'm here, you know? Like the whole reason I'm here is to save people, right? Not to let people drown. Like, why would I ever do that? And one of the reasons why he said that was because there are certain situations where someone can be drowning, and if you don't have the material around you to save them and you get too close to them, they can actually push you under. And there are many, many documented cases of lifeguards trying to save someone who was in distress and drowning, and that person in distress or drowning basically drowned that other person, and they drowned anyway. So you not only did you lose one person, but you also lost the lifeguard too on top of it. And so that's why in all training for lifeguards, they always say you have to basically, you know, protect yourself first and then help the person second. It's like the same thing that happens in airplanes, right? What do they say when the masks come down, right? When the masks come down, put your mask on first and then help somebody else. And the reason why is because you can't help anybody else if you're passed out because you have no oxygen. It's the same thing in medicine. If you're sacrificing everything you have little to nothing to give. And in the end, you're not productive. You don't help the healthcare system. You don't help patients, and you definitely don't help yourself or your family. So the sacrificial attitude is just a side effect of the training, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. The next thing that I see a lot in medicine that's very negative is the attitude of entitlement. So often, many of us went into medicine and to become a medical practitioner with the idea that there would be this beautiful outcome. You'd be well respected, and you'd like earn all this money, and you have this great lifestyle, and you'd be able to help people, and people be nice to you. And, you basically have like, you suffer now and do the work and spend the money and take on the debt to do all this education so that you could have a better future in the end. And because of that, many people feel entitled. They feel like they deserve this and that. The reality is that most of that stuff that was painted is just really untrue, especially nowadays. That might have been the case in like the 1980s, but now it's not the case. The reality is that, medicine is a grinder for most people. It's not good for them. The mainstream medical system has little to no interest in helping practitioners. There's so many things to be said here, but if you ever look at the statistics of physician suicides and how they treat physician suicide, you'll see large corporations like Mount Sinai Hospital, for example, have physicians that jump off the roof. One hospital had 4 physicians that jumped off the roof, and each time they just covered it up. They literally covered up the doctor that jumped off the roof with a tarp, and then just was like, go out your business as normal. This is how bad the system is. And so a lot of times people feel that they're very entitled because they're expecting this amazing reward. And when they get out there, it's not there. And this attitude of entitlement, like somebody deserves something, like you deserve something because you do your training. The truth is that it doesn't work. And being entitled just makes you weaker. In general, most people that are entitled, they're not as productive. They don't understand what's going on. They come off as very arrogant. And the reality is that if you're very entitled, you're not adapting to the new things that are coming out. You're not constantly learning, you're not constantly growing. And because of that, you get left behind. And finally, the last thing, which is really, really critical, especially for the medical entrepreneur community, is the major side effect of your medical training is this idea that you don't need to understand business and economics. I know when I was in medical school, it was almost looked down upon if you talked about making money, if you talked about economics, if you talked about cost, if you talked about profits, if you talked about any of those things. It was looked down like, why are you talking about that? That's less than what we're doing here. What we're doing is this beautiful ideal, and that stuff is different. The truth is that stuff is 100% required and completely baked into your healthcare system. So the reality is, like, if you want to do this beautiful surgery, but it costs $200,000 and the insurance isn't going to cover it, nobody's going to step up to pay that. So you're not going to do that surgery, And so if you don't understand how business works, you don't understand how economics work, if you don't understand how you can basically create patient flow into your practice, if you don't understand the business side of medicine, you will never, ever be able to control your future. And that's really the reality. And I would even say that a lot of those beliefs, I personally believe, are put into medicine to make medical professionals into employees and what I would consider to be slaves. And that's what you see. That's why you see a lot of people that are out there in private practice. If you go into a physician lounge, I don't see a lot of people totally happy and smiling and having a great time. I see people that are worn down, depressed. They look like they've been through hell, beat down, like they don't look very happy. And the reason why is they don't understand the business and economics of what's going on. They're working as hard as they can. They're getting less and less reward every year for all their effort and work. The amount of work and the danger and the risks of the work is going up every year. Their costs are going up every year, but their reimbursement or what they actually take home, the value of that is getting less and less over time. And so until you understand the business and economics of the medical system, you're always going to be at a disadvantage. And the best you can ever hope for is to be an employee of someone, which isn't necessarily bad, but you definitely won't be able to find freedom that way. And that's why as medical entrepreneurs, we have our saying, which is one vision, one purpose, freedom through prosperity. In order to reach that prosperity, in order to reach that freedom, you have to understand the economics and the business side of medicine. And if you don't, you're always going to be dependent on someone else to do that. And whoever does that will likely take a large percentage of what you earn or will control you in some way. And that's not really good. So anyway, these are the main side effects of medical training. I hope this was useful. Comment below if you have any questions. Let us know what you think, if these are accurate to you or they're not. Love to hear more from you. And thank you, medical entrepreneurs. One vision, one purpose, freedom through prosperity.